hello. Welcome back to the Kickback Lounge podcast. My name is Drew Young, and I'm here with my co-host in the building,
Deuce.
Kenny
No, just
Brown.
kidding. It's Kenny Brown, baby. What's up?
You already know what's going on. And then we got returning friend of the show. I guess once you're in here for a second time, you're considered friend of a show.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
You know what I mean?
That boy.
So you can add
that man.
You can add that to your extensive resume. Jake is a roofer, entrepreneur, political aspired person, we will say.
Well, it's mostly that people
around.
ask. I mean, I definitely am reading the news all the time and am interested in society's issues. I happen to be pretty hands-on in kind of tech and stuff and getting my own house in order. Mm-hmm. But I have thrown that one letter into the newspaper, and people said they really thought it was classic.
Well, after the pod last time, you did mention something to us that we will save for later in the podcast because it's pretty interesting, we'll say.
Hey.
But we do want to start off. We started talking before the pod. You mentioned how Aristotle's talked about essentially containing yourself and going against your nature with your impulses and everything. He talks a lot about that. But I find it interesting with Marcus Aurelius because he always brings up the fact that you will be gone eventually. You have to always keep that in mind. You'll be gone eventually. You'll be forgotten years from now. Nobody's going to remember your name. And he always mentions that, and he says to be kind, to be a good person.
Yeah, matters.
But I don't necessarily agree with his philosophies in terms of thinking that you'll never be you won't be around in X amount of years, thousands of years, your name will be forgotten,
right?
Because we're talking about him. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, sure, eventually he will be gone,
taken.
But it's almost pointless to me. I remember just listening, because I listened to the audiobook of Meditations, and it's I don't think that is a efficient, fulfilling way to think. And I know it's interesting with Stoicism. I want to get your thoughts on Stoicism because there's an aspect of, like you said, repressing your nature. What do you think about that?
The stoicism and kind of disconnectedness of the mind toward, ego or physical pain or fear, that is something that is often arising out of a tough situation.
Mm-hmm.
So Marcus Aurelius' situation specifically being at the helm of an, at that time, kind of waning Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
How does he, worry about his, reputation, wars, all kinds of things. So he was trying to sort of detach from some of those things rather than have a mindset of, well, how am I having different experiences? How am I living life to the fullest? Which goes back to Aristotle, his fundamental question in the ethics being, what is a good life? And it's written actually as a letter to his son, Nicomachus, the Nicomachean Ethics. And so that's an interesting detail to sort of illustrate that that's not even him saying what's best and what's right, but what's the advice to his own son. And part of his evidence for the virtues, so not being foolhardy, but not being too scared, but being somewhere in the middle, being courage, or with regard to spending, someone being too miserly, it was not generous. They were insensible and unable to enjoy things. Whereas someone too on the deep end is consumptive. They're, free spending and it's causing problems. Whereas someone in the middle is charitable. They're fun. They, enjoy things only at the right times.
Yeah.
And so,
see, that's even a little different than Marcus Aurelius because he would be more of don't show emotions. Like you said, you mentioned fun, being fun and everything. And I don't think that he would disagree with that necessarily. He would say, don't take it into excess and everything. But I find myself, especially in, conversations with other people. I mean, we just talked to Gabby about, being ambitious and everything.
Yep.
And, I tend to admire the mindset of, a Kobe Bryant, of LeBron James, Michael Jordan, all basketball players right there. But just there's some obsession with greatness, and you can't. There's different ways to be great, right? there's different ways to get to where you want to get to,
Yeah.
different strategies, and
Yeah.
multiple strategies work.
Yeah.
Like I said, because look at Marcus Aurelius. Like, he had that mindset and everything, but he's still great, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But also Kobe Bryant has a completely different mindset. Still great.
And was more concerned with the idea of his legacy. People say that he even said that he would die young. He prophesied that he might die young, and some people have a kind of idea about maybe everybody does a legacy that they'd leave behind.
Yeah.
And there's the notion of, and just nerding out about the philosophy. A class that I took that kind of had spanned the history of philosophy and the kind of designing of the kind of ideals of Western democracy and kind of a really modern sort of morality and ideas about the individual and all kinds of things. Just a really interesting course. The development of the idea. So Aristotle is about 450, 500 BC, and then Marcus Aurelius coming in far after that. So I think that perhaps those ideas were more so settled questions that allowed then for a further expounding by Marcus Aurelius of, okay, well, we know that virtue ethics is what makes the man. And so now a meditation is it's just kind of a different type of thing. But the tone of Aristotle's discussion of those virtues is that what he has noticed is that people respect those who do those things. So he says, I've noticed that the guys who are most respected are the ones that aren't too quick to anger because they lose friends, but they're also not passive. So he would just kind of say, well, that sort of seems to work.
Right.
So
Like a
that could
champion.
be correct. So, and then his student, that's what he put toward, Alexander the Great. And so the idea that, well, this seems to work. And so that's why we'd call something like that ethics versus if somebody is talking about, what's right or what's wrong. And I think to kind of bring it back to the original question, which is, the traditional values and things like that, there's a lot of, we talk about cancel culture or a lot with the environment as well. People say, oh, the climate, it sounds like it's a religion to them. Well, it actually is. If you listen to people's language, even if they say they're not religious, there's a lot of moral appeals that they make. Like, this is what we have to do. Like, you have to chip in, So that idea of what's right and what's wrong is a different question than, well, what's practical and what makes a great society?
That makes
and
sense.
that question of what's practical and how are we going to do this? That's what we're getting on by filming on Sunday night and
Absolutely.
staying hydrated with the boys.
Yeah, it's funny because we were talking on the phone earlier, and you were asking me like you wanted to like tap in basically to my schedule and like what mindset, and like I mean I've been grinding all day. Like I got up like 4:30 today.
Yeah.
Went to work, did some radio like 5. I was like 5:30 to 12 or whatever, just like grinding. Stayed probably like 2 hours after work, just like working on stuff. Went to sleep, and then we came and set this up, But for me, I feel very ambitious, and I feel like there's somewhere, a place that I want to get to, and like a network that I want to build. And I feel like that would be hindered if I was more stoic, in a sense. Not necessarily stoic. I think that's the wrong like term for it. But if I was more passive, I'll say,
There are instances in which speaking one's mind or not letting little things go is not the smoothest path.
Absolutely.
So it's, there's, if you ever play the Saints Row video game,
Yeah.
when you complete a mission, you get 2 choices at the end.
Yeah.
Do you take cash or respect? So I kind of think about it like that in business scenarios as well.
Yeah.
Do you want the cash? Do you want respect? Or if you're in a premium market, people respect when they pay a good price. So
Right,
there's
right,
that
right.
too. But, when people truly relate, I would say relating happens through emotions. So perhaps as far as really the people that I know who have the biggest networks and like a lot of friends, a lot of them are actually pretty, sensitive people who do feel their emotions. And I think that's part of,
Why do you think that's the case?
I think it's that perhaps it's the opposite, that the people who have more kind of feelings overall, they may have like bigger swings. So when they're like outgoing, they're really like after it and stuff. Like for me, for example, if I've like when that flood happened on Sunday,
Right.
I was talking to my parents. I was like, "Oh yeah, and happy Mother's Day." Yeah, okay, I'll because that was the day it was on the phone with the parents. And then I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna try to turn this around. I'm gonna try to say how can this end up being a good thing." And then I was walking around later, and I said, "No, how do I make this a great thing? Either by being liberated from my stuff." I've been listening to the Minimalist podcast lately. A little bit, but you got to balance out with the business mindset of, oh, you know, you're good as you are. You don't need anything more.
Yeah.
That's not going to get you insanely hyped, and I need to protect this to be insanely hyped. But to come back and say, you know what, I thrive when everything's shit, when it's disorganized, when I've got a rental vehicle, you know, so let's get after it.
I think it's the story of like Phoenix from the ashes, essentially. You know, where like, especially as a man, when you get to like a very low point that seems to be, or the lowest point, it seems to be the catalyst to like really getting your life on track. For some people, you know,
it's the fight or flight.
They cycle back and forth. What's your thoughts on that, Kenny?
I mean, it's definitely the fight or flight, man. I've been there a couple times. You know, it's when you get to that point, and I think my point was when I lived in the to-go boxes, I like to call it, in my aunt's basement, when the roof was literally styrofoam. And we like had to make a makeshift roof in her basement. Like we stapled the styrofoam to the roof. Definitely a interesting mindset there. And I don't think that that's a mindset that's kind of instilled in everybody, especially in America. I can't speak for every other nation around the world, but for Americans, it's very individualistic as far as, especially for man. Like in America, like I saw a clip on YouTube. It's like a lady, she's like, just some man, just show me how to make money. I swear, I don't want anything else from you. I just want to know how to make money. I saw that on you know, and I think a lot of young men even had that mindset growing up, you know, like what is the quick tip to kind of get there, you know, but there is no quick tip.
I think embedded in what you just said and the story you told is the quick tip.
Yeah.
What did you do when that roof was leaking? You built a styrofoam roofing system.
Yeah.
So
I grind it until I got out of that motherfucker. I had to get out of there.
And seriously, like that story, hearing that meant something to me.
Man.
That's really, you know, I'm sure you were a leader for several people, even though I'm guessing you weren't the oldest person in that scenario.
No.
You were one of the people that was a leader in that moment.
Right.
And how long were you there?
Like 2 years, year and a half. And, you know, the cousins move and they get a place. So it's like, what are your options in that moment? And so, you know, as a guy, I can just say like, you know, that's something that's not in everybody. You can put one person in there and they'll get out of there. They'll be the last one alive, bro. They'll be the last one alive. They got blood on their hands, you know, no t-shirt on and shit. Or you can have the person who's in that and they're in the darkest spot of their life and they just accept it. They accept the fate. And they're the one, they just fucking sit in it. And they're the ones who are not the ones who get out, you know? Unfortunately, like it's more of just like a physical get out. It's a mental get out, you know? And like everyone in their entire life, like in their lifetime, is going to go through that point. And it's like, whether you like it or not, you either have to face it head on, or like you said, you just stew in it. You sit in it and you let it consume you. So
definitely wasn't going to do that when the sewer backed up in the basement.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, you're not going to go home, and Jake, that's what I like about you too, man. Like, you're not going to go home and see this fucking water and be like, fuck, here we go. You know, now the foundation's you know, and you start going around no, like, it's like, where the fuck are my boots? You know, where the fuck is, where's the HVAC?
Were it not such a biohazard,
I love it.
I might have considered doing, even still, being a sensitive, you know, we're talking about sensitive physically, that one wasn't going to happen. But here's how I dealt with the situation. So vehicles in the shop, first night, slept in the sleeping bag in the carport right on the concrete.
Ooh.
And then get this, I noticed my heart rate the next day on the watch, it was lower. And there were some good numbers from the sleep. And I was feeling pretty good. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm going camping Memorial Day anyway. Why don't I just go buy a tent? So, and I said, well, now you got to be a beast about it and finish up the whole week. So Friday morning, I was packing up that tent after giving it a whole week. And I definitely felt pretty in tune with the nature, you know, per our conversation earlier. and it got just kind of like that. You building a styrofoam roof. It's just stepping up and saying, all right, well, let's just do something.
Let's take it up another notch.
And because
man.
it's my own and because I'm out here doing stuff, I'm going to be so pumped up that something 5 times better than how bad the last thing was is about to happen.
100%. And I feel like, dude, as Americans, that is one of the things that's part of our nature is like the idea of not to give up, the idea to keep like pursuing that whatever that is. And you know, I can even say like I can just speak on like just factual information of things that are true. Like me and this guy over here, like he said, like it's just always the mentality of like what else, and what,
and I think
and what else.
I think we talked about last time. You kind of got that mentality from your upbringing, right?
Yeah.
That like empowerment, essentially.
Oh, definitely. My dad would say, "Oh, the kid's bugging you. You're just giving him your power."
There you go.
Yeah.
He learned that in community organizing. Actually, get this, in Chicago in, I think, the early 90s, and he said that, a guy walked in that I'll never forget. He said, I'm a skinny guy with a funny name. And it ended up being U.S. President Barack Obama.
Hey.
That's pretty nuts.
That was something that did inspire me as a kid, hearing that story and then seeing him like on the big stage. Woo!
Yeah.
So shout out to Chicago. I was there this weekend. Yeah. And have a just quick interjection. So the toasted raviolis in St. Louis thing, I'm not huge on fried personally, so it's not my go-to, but I went to the Home Run Inn pizza place in Chicago. Obviously it was awesome. I wanted a thin crust with the deep dish in Chicago. Yeah, I said,
deep dish, you said?
No, I said that. No, I was going to say with the deep dish, you have a lot of potential objections.
Yeah.
From both Big Jake as well as Get in Shape with Jake, just me as a person as well as me as a kind of, and not, I mean, I'm a big dog. I get the calories in, but some of these pies, if you're reading the facts, it's unbelievable. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like I'm in town for a couple days. Slow down. But anyway, I ordered at Home Run Inn, and it's a classic place. I knew of them because I used to see we had their pizzas a couple times from Costco when I was a kid, although I think it has trans fat in the nutrition label, just so you know. And not to be a hater, they're the ones that put it on the label. So it's this reminds me of my day. I get a little Home Run Inn, and so I order these arancini balls, which at Philomena's sadly it closed down. And the guy Ken Dean who had run it, he did a super good job, and he actually passed away sadly recently.
Oh man.
So condolences to the Dean family. Yeah, Dave was a buddy of mine. Still is. I just haven't seen him for a minute. But I saw him a few. Anyway, Philomena's made awesome arancini balls. There was only a little fried layer on the outside. Yeah. Well, then I'm having them in Chicago, and it's not really dipping into the sauce. And I was like, oh, this is why toasted raviolis are legit in St. Louis. This was how am I doing this? It's falling apart. Yeah. So. Shout out to St. Louis.
Do you consider deep dish a sandwich? Deep dish pizza?
No, that one's a pie, in my opinion. Yeah, you know, it's expect similar things. I mean, if you look, if you were to look at the pies that are in the gas station, those nutrition facts. And again, you know, there's no bad food, but these ones are. You'll look at it's ridiculous, and then that same character. And it's not about the nutrition facts being bad. What I'm saying here is that. From the similarity standpoint of how much energy is packed into that crust, there's a lot of lipids and a lot of grains.
Yeah. Well, on that topic, just real quick question. You said you went to Europe a couple months ago?
Yes.
Okay, so like
a week in Spain and a week in Greece.
Perfect. So like with the health and like with the food and like what you're kind of consuming, because I also saw this online. This lady basically went to, I think it was Italy, and she said that she was full the entire time. They fed her the entire time. It was all like A-list meals, like full-fledged chef-made meals.
Italian.
It was like no fast food. Like, so when you're over there, is that like part of their diet? Is that something that they do? Is that something that you did over there, or were you eating like real meals?
So I'm definitely, just by my facial expression, I'm busted for hitting Spain McDonald's with my sister probably 2 times. We rented a car and drove all across southern Spain. We crossed into English territory to climb the Rock of Gibraltar.
Every once in a while, man.
Military history. And we took a massive walk, only place where there are wild monkeys in Europe, the macaques. They're hilarious.
Did you see them?
Oh yeah, dude, there were a lot of macaques at that
Were you nervous?
specific
Macaques.
location.
Were you nervous about random monkeys?
The only instance in which you'd be nervous is if you're approaching them being like, "Is this dumb?"
Yeah.
they mug
That
you?
would make you nervous. No, they're super cute,
Okay, I
like
was
doing
like-
their own thing. Yeah, they're. Although I learned today at the Chicago History Museum that orangutans are the biggest tree-dwelling animals.
Yeah.
220.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay,
Big
I'm not-
motherfuckers.
I'm the right size to live in a tree technically, just like the
If you're as
nature
strong as a
conversation.
orangutan.
If I like the tent a lot, you know,
Yeah.
a
Might
majority
be the move.
of our species ancestors did exactly that. So that is that is a me. You know, you were talking about getting back into the gym.
Yep.
We're not going to let that one not get covered a little bit. Chin ups is a super simple, like,
Yeah.
oh, it's super measurable. You know, you can do them on the bar. Really killer for these buys.
Yeah.
So just that can be your thing. It's like, oh yeah, Jake was talking about monkeys. Now I got to do pull ups. Anyway,
There you go, monkey bars. Go on the local monkey bars.
It's
the
a
topic of, and there's so many bookmarks that I just covered. I
Yeah.
kind of sidetrack a lot. I think you were keeping track.
So, but I do want to shift since we're talking about nutrition. Like you work a lot with fighters. How has that been?
I actually personally didn't feel that great in Europe with my stomach, by the way.
No.
The
From the
stomach was
food?
okay. Yeah, there's all this gluten and
Really?
oil. So I personally,
Really?
I could have made some better choices. The food was exquisite.
You went to McDonald's though, so
Well, that
mean,
was
it
that
was
was Spain, but then in Greece, I kind of cleaned it up a little bit.
Yeah.
But now my face is getting red, busted. But
busted.
the here's the thing with my thing with Europe. Like in Spain, they're eating these processed. You know, they'll have like the jamon York. They'll have these like really
is
salty
that?
little meats. It's like you basically ham sandwiches everywhere,
Very
but it's
thin, right?
nice. Yes,
Very thin, yeah.
And I learned what it is the pigs eat because you know you hear about species appropriate diet for
Yep.
animals.
Yep.
And how you can limit some of
yeah.
the polyunsaturated fat
Mhm.
and maximize the saturated fat. These hogs eat acorns
Oh.
rather than like
Than
the
shit?
than feed.
Then
Right?
feed. Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Rather
it's
than
own
just
shit?
feed.
spare feed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the nutritional equivalent of daytime television for the human mind. It's like
Yeah.
a food-like substance, and it means that the livestock isn't as good in other places. But in Spain, that was one thing I thought that was really nice. But for how much salt there is in this stuff, I'm like, we got to
They do
start
a lot of
pounding.
dry age, right? They do like a lot of dry
Oh,
aging and
yeah.
stuff too.
You can get meat in a cone.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
doing meat in a cone.
Yeah,
Meat
it's
in a
amazing.
cone.
But they got to increase that water consumption, man.
Yeah,
I'm
they do.
sitting I'm taking shots of water
Yeah.
at brunch, and it's like, man, I really
He
would
said
love
shots
to.
of water.
Oh well, just jabbing at the sides of the glasses because, like in US, bar and grill, it's like, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
parking
yeah,
this
yeah.
whole thing.
They bring out the pitcher.
Yeah, can we get
and-
some more?
Yeah.
I'm staying hydrated.
Yeah.
And with how salty some of the food is,
Very salty prosciutto.
but
And yeah.
get this, I've heard some people that have gluten problems in the US have fewer gluten problems in Europe.
Yeah.
I'm more insensitive to it. Like my stomach's okay, but like my mind, I just don't. I get more stressed out
Yeah.
when I have it.
Yeah. Me too.
Gut-brain barrier. But then so by the end, actually, I was like all out of sorts. I'm like, oh, let me get back into town, doing things like coaching these fighters, which you had asked about. So let's get back into that.
yeah,
I just had to get that thing about eating more protein and drinking more water in Europe.
yeah.
Said it. You heard it here first.
So how'd you start working with fighters?
So I sponsored Max Choriev for his comeback fight in January 2022 in Brookfield, Missouri. Got a
Yep.
super quick knockout. That was the night that I met Mr. Drew Young.
Mm-hmm.
He won the fight handily. And then we had one popping up. I think it was in February. He had a fight, and we just worked together on his nutrition plan for the last 8 days. The water cut and then the refeed. That
Yeah.
one was out of town, so we made some meals for him to refeed with. I do believe I have the best refeed meal. So even though I don't step into the cage, I don't challenge fighters, but I will challenge a fighter to try the food. If Mr. Joaquin Buckley
Ooh,
would like to try
calling
a
Bud
Big
out.
Buck.
Jake meal or have a Big Jake. And I did mention to him something about, oh yeah, here's my newest idea with the shakes.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "Oh, that does sound good." His content's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly, that's
Shout out
one
to
of my
Joaquin
favorite
Buckley.
Yeah, for sure.
entertainment
Yeah.
figures in all of internet.
Yes.
Oh,
Shout out
easy.
to Joaquin
Yeah,
Buckley.
dude, seriously, talking about motivation.
Yeah.
Dude.
St. Louis's own. If you
Unbelievable.
guys didn't see, go check it out. Joaquin Buckley's last knockout last night in the UFC was pretty awesome.
And he had that fire
Very
alarm in an apartment. He had a fire
really?
alarm the week of the fight, and I said,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
see, this guy's not letting the lack of sleep get to him. This guy's getting after it and making things happen, and you can't ask for more than anybody in any job,
Yeah.
much less fighting. So
Yeah,
that was awesome.
Especially a fighter.
After me and Max had that foray into the world of Get in Shape with Jake and its potential for athletes, Max Reed, Muay Thai fighter, fighting out of Maryville Muay Thai. I've known him for a long time, but recently reconnected over fitness.
Okay.
And he's won both of them that we did, both of those weight cuts. He's actually a member of the armed forces, so he gets a military discount. That one's for free. And then Adam Kading, this one, get this, he had to fight 3 days in a row to win a national boxing title, and he totally did it.
Yeah.
So he
3
has a
days in a
national,
row?
an NCAA national championship. And
I did not know that.
we started with a consultation he and I did with my friend Tony Bekovitz, who is so humble that he literally said, yeah, Jake, you can just take the credit for that fight with Dad. And I'm like, no, you were here. Like a lot of these principles he cultivates, and every single day, like we talk about, I ate this, what'd you eat? How did it? So that's a really good resource right there. But, we gave a good little plan for him. There wasn't calories counting and this and that. It was more so like food groups and kind of when to eat a couple different things. Now, normally it's not that big of a deal. I like to do lower carbs in the morning, just like the cold shower. It kind of, my catecholamines, my energy stuff is better if I'm not doing the carbs in the morning. But when you're at a scenario where every morsel matters and you're not thinking about much besides food and water, and you've got to do it safely as well as be optimized while your brain is in that state and everybody's hitting you up about the fight, you can let Big Jake tell you, yeah, Greek yogurt probably not the night before the weigh-in. Not that dairy's bad, but just the way it sits isn't conducive to the lowest on a specific day kind of scale weight. So it's pretty simple stuff. I am doing it mostly free of charge just because I like the area. It's kind of a niche. And these guys, they're working their asses off. I'm not going to say, now pay Big Jake for telling you what food to eat. It's stuff that I would be chatting about with friends anyway.
It's a free game,
Yeah, and then you get to show up to the fights and
just enjoy the whole process, and get inspired and motivated.
And it puts into perspective, what things in life truly are difficult.
Yeah, what goes into it. That was one thing, like being close friends with Max specifically, like I got to see, which I love, is like growing up, my brother always watched UFC. Like he watched the era of like, Rampage Jackson and Iceman. Like, so he's watched since those days. And so for me, I used to be around it, but I didn't watch it like that. Me and him used to watch WWE. So, for me, I grew up on that. And then when I got older, I started getting into the UFC and stuff like that. And like these guys are putting their lives on the line, like week after week after week, day after day. I mean, just getting sponsors. Like, I mean, it's just, these guys are really fighting blood, sweat, and tears no matter what. Like, that's the heart of a fighter, bro. Like, it's insane.
Someone asked the world's strongest man, Brian, or four-time world's strongest man, Brian Shaw, maybe 5.
Yeah.
He's awesome, by the way. I don't want to get that number wrong. He would say, and he's 6'8", he's been over 400 at different times, and he's like, I like the training, but sometimes getting all the food down is kind of tough.
Yeah. It's the hardest part.
With the fighting, I understand, like, loving the training and all that stuff. It's, you don't always want to do it, but at least when you're doing physical activity, there's inherent enjoyable things about it. The pain notwithstanding, I have my blue belt in Taekwondo as a kid, so not that holds a ton of water. Anyway, enough caveats. It's the risk that I respect the most. That's just what could happen and stuff. I climb roofs and it freaks me out. So,
so that actually does like make you nervous?
The idea of the fight, yeah.
Oh no, I'm talking about climbing roofs.
No, not so much. No.
Yeah.
No,
you kind of got over that.
Well, we were talking. So that was actually a concept I thought of today in this museum. I was like, you know what? So many primate species are tree dwelling. So that idea of, you can connect with the way you do the tradition of, Thanksgiving 40 years ago or 20 years ago, or the tradition of being in trees 2 million years ago.
How do you connect to that tradition?
By climbing roofs.
And
then go into the museum to learn about it, you know? The exertion physically that, there was sometimes, boxing in the gym, but more substantially like, the strong man, and then do the Olympic triathlon and like cardio, I'll show them. Well, start turning, 24, 25, 26, and I realized, Well, I didn't realize it at the
Backstar's
time.
hurting.
I realized it today.
Yeah.
I was like, what I realized today is I was like, man, I really do hammer those museums. Even if it's like, it's not like, oh, this is super fun, because it's not really all the time. I mean, it's interesting, but there are times that I'm like, okay, see this exhibit. Let's pick up some facts about Albania.
Mm-hmm.
Or, the Australopithecus species of hominid kind of stuff. And one, just because it's like very few are doing it. And so just on the basis that it's rare, there's some value there. But also, you know what? It doesn't make sense for me to physically hammer to the extremes of athletic performance that I did before.
Yeah.
But that same kind of drive, I can say, you know what? A buddy gave me an encyclopedia set. Let me kind of chip away at this a little bit. So hence when I said Albania, that's how far I am through the letter A.
There you go.
If you hear the phrase, don't judge a book by its cover, I think the place where that is the most true is an encyclopedia, because the cover is the most bland, but it has not all of the knowledge. You can never have all the knowledge, but it has
The biggest wealth of knowledge out there.
basically.
Depending on who you ask. Maybe some people might say the Bible, the Quran, the most how they say it.
holiest book.
How about this?
You know?
The highest quantity of varied information. It's
like
like a delineation of facts.
How long until you finish it?
Who knows?
It could
There's
be
only one way to
that would
find
take
out.
some time. And there's different gradations of reading it. So let's say that there was a couple pages on adhesives, and that was pretty AD, pretty far up in the book alphabetically. But shout out to AD.
Yeah. AD.
He's doing a good.
Not getting it done.
He's a good player.
He's a good
how about
player.
this? Here's my Dick Vitale. Part of why I will always like Anthony Davis is because when he was at college, Dick Vitale, we've got a young shot blocker out of Kentucky. The dude can block shots. I mean, that's it's nice. But a little 2K action. I dust both you, by the way. But
I don't know about
the encyclopedias. Oh, adhesive. So yeah, we were talking about concrete today, and it's like, oh yeah, cement was, an adhesive discovered in Rome. I don't know if it was discovered in Rome. I don't want to be caught,
I don't know about
saying a fact that wasn't totally with it.
Invented.
But I read about cement in Rome, bro.
Yeah.
So the chipping away at that book, I'll tell you what, having a fun fact here or there, if we're talking about that networking thing, you never know where someone's from, where they work, who they are related to, or the kind of things they spend on. What are those for? Family, occupation, recreation, and money. So if you're in some kind of, let's say you're about ready to go for like set an appointment time with somebody, and you're like, well, I didn't really find out occupation yet. So the tone that I use in figuring out what time is going to work well, I'm going to want to at least line that up with some semblance of what their schedule might be.
Yeah.
You don't want that to be the time necessarily that you learn their work nights. Now, if you got to do something fast, you do something fast, but there's that whole getting to knowing people thing is pretty important still.
So essentially your shift went from pushing in the field of like the physical to the mental.
There's always both, and it's hard to say that it just shifted because I was doing debate camp every year after high school. Like that to me was like the North Star. It's like, okay, win debates and win debate tournaments, and then you're the whatever dude. And now I would just kind of look at it as, well, watch out, this guy's got a title. But back to the thing earlier was the experience. So the idea of knowing that this stuff that now I'm trying to see around the world, knowing that even exists. But more specifically about that kind of shift, I would say the instance where that is shaping up is that I'm now more interested rather than, oh, well, now I want to see other places, or for a minute I wanted to try the sushi in Japan. And as fun as that would be, I said, anybody can try the sushi in Japan that can make it there and pay for some sushi. And I said, but very few would be able to, get a letter of recommendation from clergy to spend time with monks at Mount Athos in Greece.
So you want to take it to the extreme.
Very few would make their way into, Cambodia to visit Angkor Wat.
Mm-hmm.
Very few would make it into the Vatican, like that guy that just drove in there and they shot at his car.
Oh, well, and I heard that was the spot where there was did you hear about that there was potentially a lot of secret texts?
I did not hear that part.
Oh, he's in on it. He knows.
I didn't hear that part.
So he's in on it.
All I know is some dude said it, but
What secrets do you
what
think are
that
in there?
dude said, probably more than what's in that encyclopedia.
Children?
Well, no, I don't want to be, talking.
I'll say it. I'll say it.
Okay,
I'll
he'll say,
fucking say it.
yeah,
Hey, you already know what's going on.
Hey, I'm always looking at these beautiful Catholic cathedrals and all this stuff. Obviously, don't. There's a lot of Catholic people that I know that are awesome folks and all that, and some of the spaces I'll be going are Catholic, but you gotta have that house in order for sure, man. That's who knows? Yeah, who knows what they have done there?
Did you hear about that whistleblower that said the U.S. is basically involved in like? Well, here goes the video getting recommended anywhere, but the U.S. is involved in like human trafficking and like very involved in it.
Is the U.S. involved in human?
No. Did you hear about the whistleblower that came out and said that?
No.
Well, that's definitely a story that might develop. I don't know. It might get silenced, you know? Yeah. But it's just very interesting. But
it's very interesting. Yeah, very interesting.
Now let's shift to a lighter topic. I want to talk about like entrepreneurship and everything. Where does your entrepreneurial drive come from?
Well, I'd say I haven't capitalized on an enterprise of my own quite enough to say like, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur. I say I'm an enterpriser because I have the proclivity. Oh, well, I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, heck yeah. Well, you know what? Then yeah, I got to own it. Yeah, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm starting good stuff.
Well, I mean,
you're busy with these roofs. Gotta hire people to start making these shakes. Like I'm Willy Wonka.
I mean, I see it like with your, roofing company and like going to different like events, the PJ, the private jet,
the private jet,
going to like these conferences and stuff. That, like if that's not entrepreneurship drive, I don't know what is.
Well, I appreciate that, my brother. That was kind of one thing that was cool, going to see Warren Buffett in Omaha, learning a little bit about Berkshire Hathaway. And, people say, how do you beat the market? And, with stocks, options and buy the right stuff, buy and hold, all that. Well, the more simple answer of how to beat the public equities market is to be in the private equities market. Now, when you hear the word private equity, you think, some firm and things like that, but it could be as simple as just having like a business partnership or, somebody, needs a bunch of money to get something going. Okay, well, instead of sending the money to New York, as Grant Cardone says, I'm going into real estate. I'm not throwing all my money to New York, okay, with a bunch of stocks and stuff, buying dirt and homes. Multi-family diggity-doo. But
that's a big trend, especially with like the richest just buying up land in the United States.
The
Bill Gates.
They're not making more land for sure, and
Dubai's trying to. Well, UAE I guess is trying to.
There could be some
trying to make more land.
Some potential success, but in terms of using land is what it is. I would say the idea of, just because we've been so old school today, I'll say it in the Magna Carta.
Yeah.
One of the things they talked about was the royal control of lands. So the idea that the kings wanted to control the forests and not let people be able to activate. And, I don't know if it's hunt or log or it could just be anything, experiencing.
Make money or get above them in any aspect of life.
Yeah, mix their labor with Earth's resources. Do anything. And so they would say, the kings control this land. If it's concentrated by any owner too much, it's kind of the same idea, because the people do just take care of things better kind of when they own them. I don't know if we talked about it last time, but the idea of like a community farm, how everybody, it's like, we're going to start a community farm. Well, just the group incentives don't quite work.
Works out.
Well, yeah, because like who's responsible for stuff going wrong?
Right.
And who gets the yield, and how connected is their work to the outcome?
Yeah.
Well, if everybody owns what they do, whether it's, the taking ownership of what we do in the semantic sense, or literally owning things, that in itself produces the, maybe not as badass as building that styrofoam roof, but it builds that necessity to get stuff done the right way.
Right. Taking the ownership of it.
Yeah, so as far as, people buying up the land, here's the way I see it. So it kind of goes back to what's practical for us three gentlemen sitting here right now? Well, somebody out of state wants to buy this land. Well, maybe Big Jake's going to buy that land. And now we're going to have some better beef. You know what I mean? So the kind of, as you going back to the role of the individual is like, well, hey, at least we can start snapping up a bunch of land.
Right.
Or I'm doing a speech this week at a multifamily real estate investors group.
Ooh.
And heck yeah, man! I'll give you the details.
Some tickets. I want to say, let me get some tickets, dog.
Yeah, there he is. Just, the word's corny.
Yeah.
But so one of the things I'm going to say to these folks, and this is my first appearance at the group, is I'm going to say that this is not just about you guys like trying to make some money. The reason that real estate pays people is because you avoid a lot of worse and bigger expenses down the road of buildings going bad. Okay. And then the idea that, you're giving people a place to live, hardworking people. And hopefully that these are folks that want to do it right, in their own town and do the best job they can at giving, hotel managers, teachers, nurses, the best place they can to live. And say that what you're doing by buying that piece of dirt is keeping it out of the hands of Joe Schmo from no one knows. That kind of thing. So the thing that I would say for you, Drew, would be what would be your ideal house? Where are you trying to go? House? You trying to stay in St. Louis, big dog?
It depends. It really depends on how life unfolds, I'd be fine with living in St. Louis forever as long as I could travel, because I see a lot of potential in the city depending on how it goes. For sure. Especially being intertwined with seeing different people who have made it. Yeah,
different personalities.
Andy Cohen, just, people look at who was the owner of Twitter, our creator of Twitter?
Yeah.
What was his name?
Jack Dorsey.
Jack Dorsey.
He wishes he was named Jake.
Yeah.
Guarantee it. Dude, I got that Riz today.
Yeah. Jake Dorsey.
Yeah.
No, but and he has Square, which I think they renamed.
Yeah.
But I've seen people come from St. Louis. Yeah. The creator of Blavity, it's a combination of Black and Gravity. She has her own entertainment company. I can't remember her name right now, but she went to Wash U, started working at Intuit, worked her way up, and I doubt she came back. Geographically, it's not the best, but to answer your question, it just depends on how life unfolds.
For sure.
Ideally, I don't want close neighbors, because I like the isolation.
He's
and
an
privacy.
Independent king.
The rural area,
Well,
some Troy,
not
Missouri
necessarily
action.
rural, but just I want a big yard,
Yeah.
And
room to move.
I don't want to be close to people. I was actually the other day, a couple of weeks ago, I was driving. I'm like, people live oddly close to each other.
No, yeah.
Especially, and we started talking about, I forget who I was talking to, but we started talking about the proximity, just different proximities. You look at favelas.
Yeah.
They live really close to each other.
Really fucking close, dude. And that's gross.
I
feel like the other guy's lawnmower grass is hitting the side of your house.
I couldn't
exactly.
do it.
If you have the choice, if you have a lawn, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you have a lawn, or you live in an apartment, somebody brought up apartments as well.
Yeah.
Because that's even closer.
Now, how about you?
I currently live in an apartment, but I definitely, like I said, like what you were saying is definitely St. Louis. I just feel like St. Louis is getting overpopulated now. We're not getting overpopulated, but we're hitting that busy city.
Now, how is
status.
that measured? Is that measured by traffic in the streets?
Oh yeah.
Because versus Chicago,
me driving,
St. Louis is a bowl of cherries.
Me driving in traffic from right now at 25, compared to when I was 21, 22, is 10 times busier and heavier. Yes. I don't know if it's just because I'm driving more and more places because I'm older, but I feel like like 44, 55, 270,
So
170.
are you sitting there in rush hour saying bring back the lockdowns of 2020?
You said what?
You're sitting there in rush hour asking for more lockdowns?
Dude, I don't know what the fuck it is. I feel like it's our sports teams. I feel like it's our good prices of living. Like I've talked to people.
Do you want to be kind of out in the outskirts as well?
Not necessarily. I can be in the city.
So you want to be in the mix?
I can be in the mix. I don't have to live in like a Troy or like a somewhere like that. Like I'm good here. I just can't be in the city. If I'm in St. Louis, I can't be in the
So the
city.
suburbs.
County. Yeah, I'd be in the county because I just can't do city life. I just
So
it's not for me.
he's an independent king and you're a cooperative king.
Yeah, but which is weird because like I would consider like myself like more like not introverted because I can definitely be social. So it's like weird. It's a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, man. Definitely want to get a house though. I was asking him. We were talking about this in the car. Like, do you think it's the better time to kind of wait on a house, or should you just go for it this year?
You know, I'd say a lot of it's about the deal, but some of it can be about the time too. So like I'm in something that's seasonal, and so if I'm not working in the winter, I'm like, oh, you know, this. I want to get out there and make something happen. So, you know, scooping up a house during that time could be part of the formula for sure.
Do you do roofs in winter?
You can do them if you have a nice day.
Shit, if there's a hole.
There you go. I mean, we're fixing stuff. You know, snow can precipitate leaks.
Yeah.
But to touch on a topic that is a little, it's not really that contentious politically, but it is a political issue. Is so you get things like
We'll get there.
The question of how is the land expansion managed as far as like new subdivisions and all that, and there's rent control in some areas where landlords' property isn't quite as isn't able to keep up with the market prices, and so it did, and you know, just a lot of it also is just sort of facts of life, like global population is growing. And, you know, it's hard to access some of the resources.
It's a big one right now.
Yeah, stuff's probably just going to get expensive for natural reasons or like, you know.
In New York, they're trying to lower the price of utilities. I'm like, look at the fucking rent. What do you mean utilities? Like,
well, and then they'll make more laws about, you know, certain
exactly.
types of energy. I mean, the cheap energy, we all know what it is. But the impediments that, you know how earlier I was saying, like, yeah, like, when safety rules for like people over time, you know, things get more stringent, people's just behavior is different and perhaps less adventurous than at other times. Mm-hmm. And with the challenges related to building more stuff, there's not enough building for the amount of people there are, which sounds weird because there are areas where there's vacant properties, and I know, and that used to be something more where I would say, oh, that's unjust, it's horrible, and you want to fix it where you can. Mm-hmm. It's not a good thing, and there are policy solutions to things, but part of where I'm more of a thinker and less of like a take a stand and argue for it kind of guy when it comes to things like this is as I've seen so many ruins and, you know, ancient societies and things like that, and what I've realized is that what humans are pretty good at doing is building things and then leaving those things. And that's not only controversial just now, or it's not a new thing that, oh, well, these houses were built and, you know, we can go over the reasons, well, it was this guy and that law
or
and
the
these
stadium
5
was
things.
built and then it's like never used again.
Right.
There's not that, you know, nothing's gonna be a perfect usage of resources ever, and that's not to excuse shortfalls in, you know, urban planning in St. Louis specifically. There's a lot of areas where, get this, you know how people say that something bad is like an albatross?
Yeah.
Problem properties, they call it an albatross. Well, I saw a bird today at the Field Museum in Chicago that was called an albatross. And they talked about how its body is really big for its wings, so it's kind of hard to get it started up. Mm-hmm. So it was like difficult for it to take flight, and that's what you call, you know, nuisance properties. Bird. Yeah, you know, shitty vehicles, shitty furniture, clothes. There's all resources have that kind of scenario where this one couch is $5,000 new, but then a few years later, it's like, I'll give it to you for $850.
Yeah.
And so it could be almost, or I'll pay you to get rid of this thing. It's like, okay, so now it has a negative value. Mm-hmm. So I'm just more interested in kind of pondering those questions and seeing the connections between things, and then doing my part rather than, you know, this other dude wasn't, doing the right thing.
Yeah. Do you still want to be president of the United States?
There would be a very strong debate performance were one to take place, because if it comes to, fancy guys out there, all this, let's say, I'm up there with some guy that studied law and had all these fancy positions and stuff. I'd say, well, how many presidents' houses have you been to, and how many of the biographies have you read? Theodore Roosevelt was known to have addressed his childhood asthma by having rides on carriages through old New York, and it would like blow the air into his lungs, and he was out there doing all kinds of exploration and all this stuff. And I say the history of the American presidency is a lot more than just some guy that's a governor or senator. And TV is where a lot of that shifted. So here's what I will say is that if they did give me a shot to kind of say some of these things, I think the tact with which I can explain them, and I'm trying to work on getting it a little more narrow in terms of the time frame, but being a little quicker. But I like to be thorough as well. Henry David Thoreau, there's another classic author. So it would be silly to say like, oh, I want to just go do that thing, because it totally upends your life.
Yeah. And
all that stuff. But at whatever age I've been, people are always saying it. They're always like, oh, Jake, would you do it? This and that. So then I kind of, and it made it a thing in high school, like, oh yeah, run for president and all that. But
so you want the experience, but not actually the becoming the president.
Well, potentially
and you might.
And there's little modalities. So like when I was a kid, it's my mom would say, oh, clean up the shoes and socks, or like, move things out of here. And I would say, oh, well, if I was president, this would just happen. Or if it's like, oh, laundry is a big, just little ADD stuff. Now here's another one that I picked up, and this is one I've been waiting to drop on you guys. So when I was in Chicago over the weekend, the purpose was to try to buy a car. Didn't work out. Thing was a total junker. And so then, figure out what I can do now. Never put all your eggs in that basket, that. But I was Ubering around, and just to make sure that I was able to get picked up, I just stayed with the same driver the whole weekend, and then you pay him cash. And, it was like a luxury vehicle. It was a nice Acura. And so I was being driven around, and as I got back from the trip, I was like, wow, I do feel a lot more relaxed on task than other stuff. I was like, man, how much would it take for it to be worth the financial return to pay someone to drive me everywhere? Plus, you got the ADD, if I'd like to, make some calls, things like that. And then when it was time to get this podcast rolling, and I'd been talking to my buddy about this idea of getting a driver, me and Drew were scheduling this, and he said, oh, well, yeah, I can go ahead and pick you up. And I said, you know what? Average guys can, make stuff happen and all that, but you can only manifest a ride to the studio like that if you got that magic in you. So
speaking of driving, there's a new company, I think it's called Black Wolf. Not sure. They are offering driving service with an armed train guard. So it's essentially an Uber with a gun. And that's trained.
Well, here's
that's
the thing.
Pretty fucking
so
awesome.
I was going to buy a car with cash, and we were talking about.
I bet you would have loved to have him there
before so get this, I'm rolling up with $4,000 in a fanny pack, and people would say, "Oh, flexing your cash." No, this is the opposite of that, because flexing cash is buying like a $20,000 to $25,000 some 2021 model, and you're like, well, it's a low monthly payment, and I won't have to pay that much on maintenance. If you get a decent used car with cash, the maintenance really isn't that crazy. You know what I mean? And then you get the sales tax, couple thousand. So that to me is flexing cash. Me saying the $4,000, it sounds like a lot because it was converted to cash.
Right.
But I was there, and I was like, oh yeah, don't fall asleep in the Uber. You got to kind of stay alert with things.
Yeah.
So I would not do that again.
Will you be on board with that idea of having an armed guard?
Yes.
Yeah. How much would you pay for that?
How much would I pay?
For, let's say...
what situation am I in?
Let's say a week.
Is this current Jake or...
This current Jake.
Current Jake for armed...
For a week.
I'll tell you what, I'm a great communicator. And so if whoever would, armed assailant, hopefully I could just make the guy laugh, just say, hey, man.
What if it's a Chicago goon, though, and he's really on that time?
So the street smarts is where my education could certainly
Not if you have
expand.
ties, because you have ops.
Yeah.
If you're in a gang, you have ops. Why would you want somebody with ops driving?
He's
you
on
around?
demon time.
Give me somebody with no ops.
Oh man.
Honestly, the bigger thing is holding the water bottle, because if I'm carrying around a gallon, it's like, I mean, I even hurt my wrist kind of recently. I'm like, do this, and then when I'm driving to do it and all that stuff. So been looking a little more sleek lately with this selection.
Yeah.
But I would love to have more water right now, and this one's almost polished.
He said it's polished.
Now it is. That's how we roll.
You need to reload.
Well, how much would you pay for that? I want to know.
How much would I pay? So I was running the numbers today in my head, and this is unarmed. Unarmed, I was like, you know what? $100 a day. So if I did, because let's say you have a meeting that takes a while, and maybe they only work a few hours. Well, since they know they're not getting any less than 100, maybe now they're bringing you a Starbucks on the way.
I feel like 100 for at least on.
How many? Is that how long is their shift?
I'd say $100. Let's call it. Dang, because it could. That's the thing. Is like my days run long sometimes. So
if you're talking like an 8 hour and they're getting like $15 an hour, you know, they're actually making.
But they're
more.
not driving the entire time.
That's the thing.
You know what I
like,
mean? They're making a pretty penny for that amount of work.
And maybe you get the vehicle hooked up with Wi-Fi so that if they have like remote work, they can like work on, like, let's say they're a graphic designer, so not someone that like has to take calls in the moment because they're driving, but someone who could, maybe like an introverted person that can just like pick up their work and like, oh yeah, I'll wait for you. Like, oh, Jake's out of the car now, I can decompress because he was.
I would do that if you're talking 8 hours. Okay, if you're talking 12 hours, $100, $100 bones.
You're not necessarily driving the whole time, like.
Right. It's like kind of like a bus route where like you know they'll drive the high schoolers and they'll go back get the middle schoolers and they'll go back and get but in between there's breaks and lunches. Yeah. So you know I would definitely do that. I would just say like in order for that to happen, you would have to have if it obviously we'd have to talk about city, but like if it's St. Louis, just throw it out there. $100 a day, 8 hour shift. I think you can get a lot of people to do that.
That's unarmed though.
Yeah.
If it's unarmed,
that's
correct.
But we're talking about.
If it's armed, I would probably say you're looking at about 150 to 200, just because not only is that person giving you a service of like, oh, I'm taking you from point A to point B, but I'm also protecting you.
They might have to risk their life.
They might have to risk their life. You're talking like, you know, and honestly, what kind of insurance goes into that too?
Well,
you know,
here's
like,
the other fact: is if that guy's driving, is he also? That's why they call it sitting shotgun. Because you're in the side of the vehicle, so it's like.
Bro, that'd be nuts.
Is that why they call it driving shotgun?
Yeah, that's what they call it, riding shotgun. So you could almost think that
you
like,
could hold a shotgun.
Well, yeah, or you know, you would be. I think it's for like hunting expeditions.
No, okay.
That's where it came from.
Of that,
yeah, see, dropping these.
Yeah.
Little gems.
That one's not a fun fact. That's a serious.
That's a fun fact to me.
Serious fact.
I mean, is it like where the shotgun would be if you're driving?
Potential. Well, you got to make sure you shoulder it correctly if the driver's on your left.
Yeah.
So maybe actually that would be a reason why drive on the right
in the UK?
In Europe could actually be like.
Who's the person? Who's the person now using the service? That's what I want to know. Is like who's using the service? Who needs gun protection?
I have an update of how I can answer that question was purely a visual.
Okay.
At the conference in Omaha, Warren Buffett, they have a bunch of holdings, right? And these private jet pilots of NetJets, because they own a private jet service. So I was not flying on a private jet. I was just a display jet with a nice little post. But if you flip the pictures, you can tell.
Who's not going to take a picture of a private jet?
It was baller.
Everybody will.
And so I'm seeing the pilots striking. There was hundreds and hundreds of pilots. I'm like, whoa, that means that there's thousands and thousands of clients doing the private jets. I was astonished. I'm like, man, there's a ton of private pilots, and that's just one company that does
private
the service.
pilots, independent pilots.
No, they're not independent. They all work for.
Okay, I was like, oh my god.
I think it's like what, 2 pilots per flight or something like that.
Well, and there was, I'm not sure actually how many, but they were responsible for like that, because we talked to one. She said, oh yeah, we have to clean the aircraft, prepare it, kind of take care of the people and stuff.
Yeah.
And they said that the price, and I don't know if it's for the whole plane or per person. It's probably for the whole plane. Is $15,000 an hour, which if you split it up as a group is a little less devastating.
That would be with flights.
Wow.
I mean, I would hope that would be with flights.
So that's kind of and then so here's the door in the face technique. Watch what I just did. So $15,000 an hour. Okay, even if you just want one flight, that's gonna be untold
3-hour flight
thousands,
probably minimum.
unheard of millions per year, untold
Oh my
thousands per
God.
month. But guess what? Now if I'm like, hey, actually, yeah, for that driving, we could do it like $500 a week. Just $2,000, have the driver there and get that whole thing done. So that's another little psychological tactic.
Well, also, is it like service, like you can pay once a year and access the service whenever you want?
Yeah.
Or is it just like you're buying it one-time thing, you know?
It's probably a once a year thing. And like, I don't know if you guys saw that too. Uber is now like planning to launch a service to where they can let like underage people use the service, but they have to be attached to their parent, like an 18-year-old or older guardian. Which is kind of, I mean, it's convenient.
That's
but
an interesting.
let's see what happens.
Yeah, I guess
man.
I was 18
That's,
when I signed up for Uber, so that never occurred to me.
you know what I mean?
That
But like, what if you're a
absolutely
16-year-old, high school student and you missed the bus?
Yeah. I
makes sense.
mean, that's
That'd
an
be a
interesting
good alternative. It might change some stuff in society. We have to see.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of those things where there's easier service, there's also more risk. So, we have to see the loopholes on that one. But
Yeah. Plus, you got to go to school 5 times a week?
5 times a week
Most schools.
adds up.
Well, then that virtual
gotta get your ass on that
does.
bus.
I will tell you what it does create too easy of an out, in my opinion, because snow days used to be ritual. Man, it's like,
Oh,
snow day,
yeah.
this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
This is completely unheard of. And
Well,
now,
at my job, even like being a manager and shit, like some people like won't have transportation to get home, and so like we have to like we call it like rec out certain services like Uber cards and stuff for them to kind of get home.
Is that on the company's dime?
Yes. So stuff like that. So I won't name the company, but it's just one of those kind of things where
If I had the option of like that at work, I wouldn't drive myself. I'd be
You know-
like, come pick me up.
you know what I mean.
You know
Like
what I
I'd
mean?
always use that service, and so like to your point, it's very convenient. So it's going to be weird to see how we use that in today's society where kids know internet in and out. Or we're going to start to see them where they like kind of. We'll see some fake accounts for sure, but it's like, how do they use those fake accounts? Are they going to start using those fake accounts to kind of get in bars, clubs? Or are they going to start to steal these cars? Kia Boys. Imagine Kia Boys having that service, and they're 16 and 17 years old, and all they want to do is get a lick.
I mean, there's always going to be a
You
portion of
it's
anything.
You know
certain
something crazy?
things.
I almost never think about that age group in a way. You know how people say
I deal
never.
with them. I deal with them every single night with Kirkwood PD.
Oh shit, we got.
But that's as far as I'll go with that.
We got a tough guy in the house.
This is as far as I'll go with
Who's a
that.
snitch?
And it, well, it's just, dude, this generation of kids in general. I mean, it's just I've never seen anything like it, and I hate sounding like that because every kid. I mean, people older than us said the same shit. These kids are terrible. They do all kinds of shit. They legitimately are terrible, dude. Like they legitimately are
I don't know.
like killing.
Well,
me.
here's kind of the way I see it. Is with a lot of problems, there's like,
Nuance.
well, the way I see it is like the best the best stuff will happen over time, but also greater extremes of worse.
I mean, man.
You know what I mean? So it's like, on average, math test proficiency like decreased, but we have a few that really went out and killed it
Yeah,
this
we have
year.
this kid that graduated at 15 from college,
Or like, in general, like
Yeah, man.
fitness kind of decreased in general, but a lot of records were broken in that time and
Right.
sport became more popular and all this
Right.
stuff where it's like, oh yeah, we had great medical advancements, but chronic disease also got worse.
Well, that's Elon's argument for
that's-
having a more population because there's the gems in there.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Oh, that's what the labor shortage, that's a big part of it is the generation stuff and people. I mean, so Afton, Missouri, that's where I live. There's small brick houses, 1,200, to 1,500 square feet. Back in the 60s, 70s, they'd have like 6 kids, 5 kids. The parents, I know of parents that slept on the couch in these areas.
Yeah.
And I'll meet people from all over town that, oh yeah, I grew up over there. So it makes me strategic to live there because then you get family, occupation, recreation, money, conversation rolling.
There you go.
And
Little
it's a
nugget.
it's a classic place, and we're doing roofs in Afton as well. But the so you have all these people living in these small houses, whereas now just the the children per house is down like crazy.
Dude,
and
it's
what
nuts.
coincides with that is then, okay, well now that their land is going further and further out.
Yeah.
And so kind of to your point earlier about the overcrowding, the sort of, when I said, well, how do you measure it? Well, road infrastructure doesn't always like keep up with it
Right.
the
That's
same
true.
way.
Correct.
So then you also get the question of, well, how do we build the roads in a way that isn't, conflicting or wrong? Or
They've
it's
been,
not
they've
the
been
roads.
they've been fixing our roads.
Maybe it's not the roads,
Yeah.
maybe it's the cars.
for
Because what if you build, like, obviously you have to fix the roads first, but then, like, maybe it's the diversity within cars. Like,
that's going to solve it.
well, that's the issue. Like, maybe if you get more uniform,
Yeah.
like, think of a dystopian Tesla future where everybody's driving it. Look at Elon Musk's tunnels.
It's like the movie
know?
WALL-E,
Yeah.
which is the best Disney
Well,
movie, by the
oh,
way.
oh.
I hate to say it. It's not just like the best things aren't always fun.
Mm-hmm.
That movie isn't that like fun.
Yeah, it's top two.
But
It's
in my
top two, though.
opinion, it was the most
For sure.
relevant.
That's an interesting
Especially-
take.
Still
Most relevant or best movie?
to this
Ever.
day.
Well, Holes was technically a Disney movie, and I gotta
Ooh,
say
that's a
that
good one.
one's my favorite. Even
This
if
man said holes.
That's a great movie. You don't like Holes?
You've
It's
got to
alright.
go.
Oh, man.
If we're talking-
One for me, one for Mr. Zeroni.
If we're talking top 3 Disney movies to prove a point, definitely WALL-E's up there, man. But you can't say Holes. I don't know. It didn't really.
That's not to prove a
shift.
point. That's just a good movie.
It didn't shift
Although
the narrative.
It totally,
It could. I mean,
totally
yeah.
proves a point about like keeping that dream alive.
Keep
Yeah.
digging.
Reconnecting with like
Keep on digging, baby.
yeah,
Keep
dude.
digging.
One, it's my favorite. It's that and Boondock Saints are my two favorites.
Yeah, that's a good one,
so
too.
it's gonna-
Do you have one?
If I had to say like that proved a point and kind of woke you up, I don't really have a Disney movie, but Oliver Twist was mine. The 1960 Oliver Twist movie, one in
Yeah.
black and white.
I'm watching.
I know it's kind of weird, but like that's one of those ones that where it was like it showed me like old America and stuff, and like I guess it was Europe. It was old Europe, and just like that whole thing was just like nuts.
I'm watching 1984. I think it's Orson Welles.
George Orwell.
George Orwell. I'm thinking of George Orwell. With a lot of stuff coming true, which is just insane. It predicted a lot of like AIs in there, just like
Ooh,
Big
AI.
Brother, the whole idea of always being watched.
Yeah.
I mean, I tested it out the other day to see which of my devices could hear me, like from the furthest, and I think between like Google Home, like Echo, Amazon, Alexa, and everything, and
Yeah.
it's crazy the microphones they have in there.
I can't do those for that reason.
And I mean, if you look, Bezos has a
It's
contract.
It's not a classic guy thing. I'll tell you
I'm
that.
just not about that life because I do want to. It's cool like technology because you can do some
Yeah.
crazy stuff with that, Jake. Like it's insane. But for me, like you said, it's the idea that they can hack and hear at any point, and I just
Yeah.
And it's a part of a good life.
Bezos has a contract with
that-
even though they came with these two,
Since
but
with,
it's,
like,
it's like
government
since when was
agencies.
that? When was that part of the recipe?
now.
You know, it's
I
like
mean,
it just got invented last week. Okay, well that must be the thing.
Yeah.
Not, it doesn't get my vote.
I mean, like you said, Wally, essentially.
yeah,
You know,
making
Just
our life a lot easier.
making life more convenient. That's where
Convenient.
we're shifting towards.
Well, and then it also shows like the aspect of all the waste that it created.
Yeah, yeah.
And the way it took up space and all that stuff, man.
Yeah.
I will say not to show love to another podcast, but we can all eat the minimalists, and they don't even advertise, so it's not about.
That's two times,
eating.
bro. 3 times
Yeah.
we gotta cut this
Okay.
out.
Well, he played a roofing ad of a different company earlier, and I said I'm gonna get you back for that one. And I was
Off
like,
the air, off
I
the
was
air.
like blank.
I'm gonna have to bleep this.
He was like blank roofing, and I said, "Oh, I have no idea who that is, even though they've been in business for 40 years." So we even now, King.
I still don't know who they
I'm
are.
gonna bleep
But
it. I'm
anyway,
bleeping that.
Just kind of decluttering stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Wally, they were not connected with the nature by any means.
What do you think about AI?
I'd say he's probably the flyest baller in NBA history.
Talking about artificial intelligence.
Right now, it seems like it's more of like let me put it this way: you were the first person to hit me with something where I was like, okay, that made some use out of it. It's not something I've looked into that much, so I don't have a ton of subject material that I'm saying is insubstantial.
Mm-hmm.
But I hadn't heard something that really got my attention until you had mentioned something that I'm not going to give away trade secrets on how you did, but that you did, and it sounded badass.
Do you want some AI generated questions for you?
I'm down.
All right, here we go. Okay, let me play that for you.
If fear and failure weren't a factor, What audacious goal would you set for yourself?
I'd become the governor of Missouri and then the president.
Is fear a factor?
I would say so.
You're Joe Rogan, man.
Hey, fear factor.
There we go.
If you could have a conversation with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
It would be with Ben Franklin, and I would ask him about how he brainstormed, or I could just finish his book, which I own, so I should do that too. Team
How has
Human.
social media influenced our perception of reality? Are we more connected or more isolated?
We're more isolated because connection, I feel like, is something that's more real in the brain. And it's affected our perception of reality because you see the worst of things and the best of things, and that can mess you up.
What's the most significant risk you've taken in your life, and how did it impact your journey?
Driving across the country to go do storm restoration in Hurricane Florence. It taught me how to do business the right way and get stuff done correctly in construction.
Jake, as an entrepreneur, you've likely faced rejection and adversity along your journey. Could you share a specific experience where you encountered a setback and how you persevered through it?
There was somebody that I had done a lot of work for, and they ended up, without having an agreement, and they ended up saying, Jake, no, someone else is going to build the roof. And I said, you know what? By the end of the day, you'll be replaced 3 times over, and I'm going to work with some folks that really appreciate what I do.
During challenging times, it's crucial to maintain self-motivation. How do you personally use adversity and rejection as sources of internal motivation to keep pushing forward? Self-care is vital for entrepreneurs. How do you prioritize your physical, mental, and emotional well-being amidst the demands of running a business?
I picked a business that involves being a people person, so it just scratches my itch in that way. You just eat the right food, you train the ways that you like, you use it to connect with other people, you keep drinking that water, and the motivation mindset is you just feel the feeling. You say, oh, it makes me negative, boom, let's go do something.
Mentorship plays a valuable role in entrepreneurship. Could you talk about the importance of finding a mentor and the impact it has had on your own personal and professional growth?
I'll tell you what, I read a book tonight by this hedge fund guy that I met over at the Berkshire Hathaway conference. He had even built roofs when he was younger. He just started up a hedge fund out of nowhere, got super successful, had some setbacks, had to build some stuff back up. Now he's happy in the newsletter business. That guy, I hope to meet him again. I liked his book.
Can Jake Little share some of his favorite success stories from working with fighters and athletes on nutrition?
Favorite success story is when one of the fighters, Adam, had to make weight 3 days in a row. That was a very unique challenge and tough to find any information on, so it just meant that there had to be confidence and communication.
As someone with right-leaning political views, what are the key principles and values that guide your political ideology?
To describe it as right-leaning is sort of a loaded question, but and honestly, ever since I started thinking about what logical fallacy that is, I just couldn't really say so. I don't want to be put in that box. I'd probably be voting for Republican, to be honest with you. Next.
Next. That was about 16 some change.
Does that answer the question, you think, or no?
Oh, yeah. It was about 16 and some change.
No, does it answer the question, I think?
It does.
Probably not. I forgot what the second half of the question was. That's a problem.
Can you speak to the importance of free market principles and their potential impact on job creation, innovation, and economic prosperity?
The idea that people can make better decisions when they have proper exposure and incentives to the business decision at hand is a stronger argument to me than the idea that government can reliably come up with better practices.
What's your body count?
Hell no, to the no. Yeah, my name's Bishop Bullwinkle on that one.
So we got the AI questions in there. I told the AI a little bit about you. What do you think? Obviously, the body count one. I'll confess that was
You're gonna
me.
have to rain check
That was
today.
me.
Hey.
That was me. All right. But what do you think about the AI question? I told a little bit about your personality, and what do you think about those questions?
It's like, what do you think about the questions? Yeah, the AI bot was asking me what you thought, but they sounded like they were on an AP test in a way. Like that to me, like it would give content, multiple commas. That's what I would notice. I would say, sort of like the political views with insert something and posit it as being the case.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of the stuff, it's formal stuff. I mean, the language is pretty crispy. I'm not gonna BS that one.
Yeah.
I wonder if we tailored, if we said, if I used more of the questions with your name in it, if you felt like it would be more personal. What did you feel when it said your name?
This was some Ninja Mind stuff because we were just talking before the show about how I'll sneak people's name into a conversation, make those brainwaves light up a little bit. I'll tell you what, it definitely started to make me not think as much about the fact that it was AI.
Yeah.
And then it almost made me think, it was like the whole setting changed. It was like I was in a ride almost. It's like, Jacob, here you are in a certain space. What do you think about this?
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about that. And then also, oh, wait, what am I actually going to say? And then I was like, wait, these are actually pretty serious topics too. Mm-hmm. And then kind of how I roll is I pick up speed when I see it's at about 9 seconds. It's like, okay, now here's what I will say though. I can, if you were to do a word count on how many words come out in 15 seconds, I'm racking them up.
Fair point. Do you feel, I mean, it's interesting, just AI. Do you feel like you won't be judged for your answers because it's AI?
No. I think people will take everything you say for the most part at face value, because here's the thing, you can watch somebody in a podcast say something, and when it's transcribed, that's a different, it is different. So whatever I said in response to that was, what I said. Mm-hmm. Now, a caveat that I did actually have a gummy a little earlier today. Some of the questions I can't answer, but that one, busted.
It's interesting because, I mean, I implement AI every day. I'm going to use AI to clip this podcast. There's a AI that will clip your podcast, write captions for it and everything. And like it knows, it will say, this is the subject that we talked about. This is your captions. Here's the 1 minute clip for it. It'll do that. And that was actually two AIs. That was an AI for chat. I used ChatGPT to formulate the question, so a little bit about you, and then obviously the one to speak.
Now, what that potentially does would be lower the barrier of entry for people to get into the space that you're in as far as kind of tech. So my response back to you is, how do you then make sure that your ability to deliver those content skills is either not replaced by AI or is convincingly better than AI?
By using AI. Because you learn from using AI. I've learned sentence structure, especially when it comes to one thing I do with my work is write podcast descriptions. And obviously I transcribe the entire segment. So that's an AI that transcribes it. And then I use an AI to write a summary, a title, a description, and hashtags. And obviously it's not perfect yet. Just AI in general, especially with like just ChatGPT 4, it's going to advance as it learns. But I see it as like, if you're not using AI, you've already lost. Obviously, that's not the case for everybody, because look at like Warren Buffett. Who knows if he uses AI? But in my field and in my sense of thinking, to get very deep, I feel like humans eventually will be symbiotic with technology if you don't consider us already symbiotic. I mean, obviously, there's some isolated populations that aren't, technologically advanced.
Right.
But the vast majority of, at least America, I'll say, which is my society, my culture, so that's why I reference it. If we're already bound by technology, can you get back home, you think? How long would it take you to get back home? I guess there's signs.
However long it would take,
be too long.
It would be super primal.
Yeah.
Well, it's still, but think about, so get this, when I think he's my great-great-great-grandfather. When this guy would buy a horse, he had one question: can it swim?
Mm-hmm.
And there's stories about him like sleeping while the horse stands about, the great frontier, or he'd, walk out of the house in Ohio and say, "Hey, I'm walking to Missouri. I'll come back."
Mm-hmm.
So it's not too far, but your point about the technology being the big facilitator is key, because we're talking about the roads earlier. Part of the problem of having such a car-centric society is once that thing is gone, it's a showstopper.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a leak in the road. You're stranded.
And if you want to get super deep, I mean, if people with religious ideologies will probably disagree with this, but I had a philosophy at one point, and I may still have it. It's a little different, but are we already technology? Because what makes a human a human? Is it a function of biology and electrons and chemical balances? Because what is being happy? It's a chemical balance at the end of the day. Like chemicals release in your brain, dopamine and endorphins and stuff. Are we already technology?
We'll get this, not to be a semantics bro, but the word technology is often used as a stand-in for this stuff,
For electronics,
which is information technology.
I want you to give a final message to people, and maybe they want to reach out to you, ask you a question, pick your brain a bit. Where can they find you, and what's your message?
Catch me on Instagram at Get in Shape with Jake. I like communicating with folks, so if you do have any questions or want something, I'll get this. I'm even so generous with my time. I was helping some other guys that are trying to do a roofing company, Wow. So I just love
not the aforementioned.
Just some guys I went to high school with. They shout out to John and Tony, as well as Tony P. There's also Tony B, who's my best bud. But shout out to everybody at the K-Po crew. Because those are the kings that are going to truly listen to this whole thing. So that's who is worthy of the shout out of my time right now. Just so thankful to work with people at my age group in the job. I'd say if you're not loving your job, try to figure out a way to work with friends somehow, with people around your age group. Yeah. We were talking earlier about, I was like, 18, 20-year-olds, I don't really think about, younger people and their scraps and all this stuff. Here's what I do recommend for people in that age group is you can't always control being the smartest guy in the room. They say, never be the smartest guy in the room, but you don't have control over that. What you can do is be the youngest guy in the room. Mm-hmm. And if you're the youngest person in the room, then your presence is like, it's special. Oh yeah, this guy, you've got a lot of promises and that. I think that's where a lot of the hype about me being president came from. Was like, Jake's he's made his way into here. And then that's continuously scaled to where I'm going to go to.
He go?
Yeah, I'm going to go to an ancient mountain in northern Greece.
Right.
So just get after it in every way. And let's make it a killer week.
There you go. Thank you for listening to the podcast. My name is Drew Young.
I'm Kenny Lee Abash.
And I'm Big Jake Little.
Big Jake Little. You heard it here first. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, rate 5 stars, comment your controversial thoughts. Tell us we suck. Tell us we're great. We love it all. We're here for the comments. It helps the algorithm, like the video. And follow us at TKBL Podcast on Instagram and the K-Pack Lounge on YouTube.
Appreciate y'all having me on.
Thanks, Jake, for coming on. We appreciate it, bro.
Hell yeah, Kings.
Yes, sir.